All right, happy engineer, welcome back. And Brenden, so glad you are here. One of the top communicators in the world in the house, setting the stage with the bar real high, but I know you can jump over it. Brenden, welcome to the show, man.
I'll try my best, Zach. I mean, you're already a pretty great communicator yourself, so I have a lot of run for my money today. Great to be here.
I love what you're doing. So Brenden, at MasterTalk, your YouTube channel, 30,000 plus subscribers. And a lot of times we spend time in this podcast digging into people's stories and your origin. But today, man, there's just too much meat on the bone around communication. We got to get right into it, because if there's one skill set that every single engineering leader I've ever coached needs to develop even further, it's communication. There is no end to the need to develop that skill. And it's probably not just engineers you could say that for, but I'm really excited. So set the stage for us first. What is it that created your mastery around this topic, your passion for this topic, just to let us know where you're coming from, and then we're going to dive right in.
Absolutely, Zach. So for me, it all started in college. I went to business school for accounting, funny enough. That's how I learned how to do numbers. I never thought
Kindred spirit with the engineers, man.
So yeah, I wasn't looking to do what I'm doing today, Zach. A lot of it was an accident. So while I was doing my accounting degree, I did these things called case competitions. Think of it like hackathons, but for business school. So while other guys my age were like playing sports like rugby or football or baseball, I did the nerd version of those sports competitions, which was presentations competitively. That's how I learned how to speak. But then as I got older, I started coaching all the other students on how to communicate ideas effectively. And then I realized, Zach, in that moment, that wait a second, everything I'm sharing with them isn't really available for free on the internet. So I started making YouTube videos on communication, called it MasterTalk, and the rest is history.
I love it. It's interesting, this belief that we have that everything can be found easily and for free online. And this wasn't that long ago, and you couldn't find it. Why do you think that is? What is it about communication training? Is it just everybody wants to monetize immediately, they're not giving it away? Or was there something else you found when you were looking for that back in the day?
What was missing was practicality and simplicity. So a lot of the people who were sharing videos, before I used to call them my competitors, they're friends now. They're great people. There's nothing wrong with them. But the mindset, though, Zach, is because the people who are creating content are generally in their 50s, because it takes a long time to develop expertise in communication, usually. Because of that, a lot of them are academics. So their PhD is in communication. So whenever they share an idea, it's very theoretical. It's not, hey, I have a coaching business, or I coach people for free and I help them achieve this outcome. So now I'm going to teach you how to do the same. It's more, oh, I read this textbook and this is the theory around communication. And that was the challenge, is for somebody who's new to the subject, they go, well, how do I implement this? Like, be yourself. What does that look like in the real world? So those are some of the flaws I saw with the model.
So let's pull that thread you just mentioned, that it takes a long time to become a master of communicating ideas effectively and speaking and these skills. What's a realistic belief? If I'm an engineer today, this is Zach White 10 years ago, before I could be a great podcast host and do that. What should I expect if I'm going down a communications development journey?
In some cases, it could take a while, but the way that I've restructured it, I think you could see results in as little as a week or two, actually, very quickly. I don't think you can be a master communicator in like a week, in the
Yeah.
same way that when we do our engineering degrees, we get that engineering ring, we work really hard. Yeah, it's not an overnight thing, but I definitely do believe with the strategies we'll be teaching together today, people can get results in as little as 7 days. Yeah.
And when you say results, break it down for me. What are the types of measures or outcomes that we would look at in terms of results that help me know I'm becoming a master communicator?
The perfect engineer's question. So right, so in business, right, when we have KPIs, or when we're losing weight, we're trying to be fit, there's a lot of specific KPIs you can measure, right? So let's say we try and get a six pack in the gym, it's body fat percentage. If we're trying to grow our businesses, it's top line revenue, it's gross margin. What does that look like in communication, Zach? Because communication is such a vague topic, right? So for me, what it looks like is the following. Communication is like juggling 18 balls at the same time. So one of those balls is eye contact, one of them's smiling that you're doing really well on the podcast, another one's facial expression, storytelling, body language. But it can get really overwhelming for a
Yeah.
lot of us. Right? The analogy I like to use with engineers, specifically in the software side, but it applies throughout, is when you started coding your first language, the first time it's really tough. You're trying to debug the software, you go on GitHub, you're trying to figure it out. But then as
Yeah.
you learn that language, you learn the process it takes to be successful, and then you reapply that with the new languages you're learning, whether it's Ruby on Rails, SQL, it doesn't matter what the language is. So now, how do we apply that same rationale to communication? What are the three easiest balls we can juggle in the air? Let's start with the first one, then I'll throw it back to you. The
Perfect.
random word exercise. Pick a random word like tissue box, like cup, like home, like light bulb, and create random presentations out of thin air. Why is this relevant, especially for engineers? Number one is because it helps you deal with uncertainty. Life is filled with this, Zach. Let's say you meet somebody new at a party, at an event, at a networking cocktail. You have no idea how that conversation's going to go. So you need to invent a conversation. The second reason is that if you can make sense out of nonsense, you could make sense out of anything. So I encourage you to do that a few times a day.
The random word exercise. Okay, I love this. And just to be clear in how you would do this and practice this, you or someone, or maybe I Russian roulette in a book on the shelf, I grab a single word, and then for some amount of time, I riff on it. I'm going to speak, create a presentation. That's the exercise. Is there more to it than that, or is it that simple?
100%. And then I'll just add a layer on top of that, which is we don't get points for doing it well. We get points for doing it a lot. So, for example, right, let's say we got 50 bugs in a software. I try my best to bring this back to engineer whenever I can.
I love it.
So let's say there's like 50, 60 bugs in a system. Are you going to spend 80% of your time on one low risk bug that you can't solve for? No, you're going to spread out to the others and see what you can fix really quickly. So it's the same analogy with the random word exercise. Don't worry about, oh my God, if I got the word drawer, I don't know how I'd approach that. Or if I got the word home, just worried about, are you doing this a lot? Because the more time you're building that muscle, the easier it's going to be for you to deal with uncertainty, which will be necessary, especially for engineers listening to this who want to get into those leadership roles in their companies. Because at that level, the job isn't, hey, you need to code every day. You need to do deliverables every day. It's you actually got to manage people, and that requires a different skill set that engineering schools unfortunately don't teach.
Yeah. Okay, I love that. So quantity, get the reps, you get points for doing it, volume matters. And I'm going to keep pulling the engineer thread because I am one, Brenden. I can't help myself.
Please, please, please.
So as I imagine the arc of practice on this one ball that's in the air and we get our reps, would I consider growth to look like, first time I'm stuttering, I'm overthinking, I can't come up with cohesive ideas, I'm just blabbing, or out of 2 minutes, I'm only even talking for 30 seconds because this is so uncomfortable for me. Maybe I get to where I can at least speak without lots of pauses and weirdness at some point, but it's still pretty incoherent. Maybe I get to the point where I create a story that is made up, but at least it's an interesting story. It might actually grab someone's attention. And at some point, mastery, if I gave you a word, you're going to craft something that we thought you prepared before we got here. It's like that good. Is that kind of would you put different points in the journey, or help us understand what improvement looks like?
I love the roadmap that you parlayed there. It's actually very well thought out there, Zach, that you just did on the spot. So really, really good. I completely agree. So what happens, there's a couple of things I'll point out for engineers specifically. One, it's a win just to get to 100. So that just as a baseline, if you're just measuring the KPI of how many times are you actually doing the random word exercise, and let me be clear with this, you don't even have to do it with other people. So for this audience, it's more, you could be alone in your basement.
Okay.
If you shower every day, which I hope most engineers do, you just do it alone in the shower, right?
You're calling us out, Brenden.
Right. Yeah, well, if you got a go live going on, I guess you won't have time to shower much if you're trying to get the system to go live. But anyways,
Too funny.
right, so that's one piece. But the other game here is thinking, okay, I've done this 100 times, but the other piece is realizing the multiplier effect of what that exercise brings us back in the boardroom. So let me go through a couple of those, Zach.
Okay.
The first one is often engineers don't speak up enough in meetings in general. And what I love about the random word exercise is that it forces you to do the harder thing. The harder thing. So if you're talking about avocados for 30 seconds, what I've seen with a lot of engineers in my career is they'll still struggle after 50 or 75 times. But it doesn't matter because when they go back into the boardroom, they go, this is really easy. Like I'm doing the same scrum meeting, I'm working on the same product like I do every single week. My team is the same, and the expectations are also the same. Sure, they might change with levels in the
Yeah.
company, but it's not like your director, your VP is looking at you and saying, okay, Brenden, Zach, I need to talk about avocados for 30 seconds. No, it's something that you've worked on for the last
Yeah.
2 weeks.
Yeah.
They have a lot of expertise in. So what happens is when we do the harder thing outside of the boardroom, everything else becomes easier. But the most important KPI is really just to do it a lot.
I love this. What's the second of the three most important balls?
So the second one is called the question drill. We get asked questions all the time in our life, from in a meeting setting where, let's say, the project executive, the delivery executive is going, okay, what's the status on this meeting? That's an example of a question. Another one is with family, where you're having conversations with family, they ask you questions, or even on a podcast like what we're doing now. But most of us, Zach, are reactive to those questions. We're not proactive to them. So I'll give you an example with me when I was guesting on podcasts, or even to make this more relatable, when in my past life I was a technology consultant at IBM, I was leading a lot of SAP implementations, so a lot of it was technical. So a lot of them would ask me a lot of system requirements questions, and I wouldn't know the answer to it because it
Hmm.
was my first time implementing the product, so I didn't know anything. So what did I do instead? Every single day, what I did is I answered one question for 5 minutes, and I did that for a year. But if you do that for a year, Zach, you'll have answered 365 questions about your stack, about your core technical expertise, and what you're working on within the company or just in general in your life. And you'll be a lot more proactive about managing those questions. And you can focus more on the delivery of your answers so that you project the confidence and the conviction versus the core technical right answer that you need to deliver for the
Mm.
client.
Brenda, would you give us a few specific examples of the types of questions you practiced when you, and probably still do, execute this every day?
Absolutely. So I'll give one for education. I'll try my best to add a few engineering ones too. So for education, of course, it's simple, right? So for us, it would be something more like me and you would make a list of all the questions our clients ask us. So let's say for me, it would be, okay, how do I overcome the fear of communication? One that I get a lot from this demo is how do I present in a second language? I'm an immigrant from India or
Yeah,
China,
yeah.
and English is not my forte. How do I communicate to the rest of the group? That's one. Another one is how do I sound confident in a boardroom? So what I'll do is I'll have these list of questions, and every day I'll just take one and I'll answer my to the best of my abilities for 5 minutes, and I'll do that. So for somebody who's more in the engineering background, you can definitely do this with people who are executives. So I'll give you an example. Let's say I was an engineer in corporate. I would go into a scrum meeting, but this time I would pay attention to what the delivery partner or the person I want to be in the company is
Yes.
asking other people. What questions are they asking other people? But what most engineers don't do is they just they're spending most of that time in the meeting worried about their turn versus being a little bit more proactive and going, what is that executive actually asking? And writing
Hmm.
those questions down so that when the pressure's off and the meeting's over, they go back and say, what if I was that executive? What if I was that VP of engineering? How does that person answer those same questions that he just asked or she just asked to everyone else? And how can I answer it like them? And that's how we build that skill set. And often what that looks like, Zach, to get really detailed, is a lot of engineers don't tie the deliverable that they're building with the business outcome of of what they're
Sure.
trying to
Yes.
build. And that's a good way to improve it.
I love this. So, for me, if I want to put this into practice right now, sit down with the blank page, I could probably take a couple angles. One, what questions have I been asked in the last week from my clients or in the context of an engineer at work, from my boss, from my stakeholders and cross-functional partners that I could probably have delivered better if I had done some practice. So capture those.
Yeah.
And then I love this idea of the aspirational role. where do you want to be next? What's that dream job? Or maybe it's a truly distant aspiration. What kinds of questions are they asking or being asked? Write those down. Start getting the reps. The other thing I found with this, Brenden, I want your perspective. When I think about maybe interview practice, this is a context that comes up. People get a list of interview questions, and maybe because they want the new job, they're actually willing to put in the time to practice answering them. And one thing I get asked by people a lot is, well, hey, I've got my answer for that question done. And typical engineers, a lot of times they'll write it out and script it, really say, okay, well, let's back up from that for a moment. And then I want you to just answer it in the moment without your script. Again, let's do it, another rep. And they'll say something a little bit different than what they wrote down the first time. And I say, perfect, I'm glad it's different. Now let's do it a third time, and let's do it a fourth time. And we see sort of the convergence of where their energy and their best answer actually lies by doing it multiple times on the same question. So would you agree? Do you recommend, like, it's not just a one and out, take your top 5 questions maybe and do them over and over, or how do you approach that?
First of all, I love your frame, Zach. I think that's awesome, right? Because that's the big part we didn't even talk about that I'm glad you pulled up, which is the job interview, the promotional case study. How do we actually answer those questions better? So you touched on all the right points. The only thing that I would add on top of that is when we're evaluating the quality of the answer, I would say for most of the engineers I've seen in this space, the biggest mistake they often make in those interviews is they focus too much on the specific deliverable they worked on a project versus the teams that they led on that project. So let's say you're interviewing me, Zach, and you'd be like, why should you become a director in this company or a VP? I'd say, oh, I worked on this specific thing and it led to this result in the team. So they're just focused on the deliverable. Whereas what a VP does really well, that I'm sure you teach your clients really well to do, is really about saying, no, this is what my team has achieved. I've led a team of X number of people to achieve this result. And this is why we achieved this result, to help the business move in this direction. And that's why I feel I'm best suited to enter this level in this role, because I want to have bigger impact within the organization. So the languaging of those answers is very different than staying really narrow focused on this is my project, this is what I need to do, versus, to your point, the aspirational piece of who we want to be and talking like those people today.
You and I'll pause to acknowledge for a moment, Brenden, as I hear you describe that, it reveals why working with a communications coach and someone with your skill set is so important, because here we're talking about a simple exercise, the question drill, but within that, you alluded to, it's like, well, how do I grade the quality of my answer? Well, work with Brenden, get that mirror back to say, okay, nice job. You didn't stutter. You didn't load it with filler words like some of the table stakes things are under control. But now let's look at the narrative, the story, the content. Is it logical? Does it have energy? All these things. There's a whole nother set of amazing qualities to dig into. That expertise really, really helps. And if you can have someone share that back with you, it's awesome. So shameless plug, go check out Brenden's show and work with him, hire him, because it really, really does matter. What's number 3? So random word exercise, the question drill. If there's that third ball you're going to get right, what is it?
Absolutely, brother. So, and I appreciate the kind words as well. So ball number 3 is something that's going to scare a lot of engineers. So let me frame this in the right way. Okay. It's so simple, nobody does it. And if you do this, I promise you, you will be in that top percentile that we're looking for, right? The gift about being an engineer, Zach, is there's not a lot of people who are really strong at both. Who are strong at both the engineering prowess, the talent, whether they're software, whether they're mechanical, doesn't matter what the type of engineering is, and also someone who's a great communicator. So if you do the things that most engineers aren't doing, you will get the results that most engineers will not get, right? So what does that look like for number 3? Send video messages to people you really love in your life. Okay, make a list of 3 to 5 people. It doesn't even have to be people at work. It could be a brother, a sister, a client you really love, a friend that you went to engineering school with, and just send them a 20-second video message to just show them appreciation. And this is where I get all of the objections. Well, Brenden, how do I know if it's perfect? How do I know if I got the right answer? What's the structure, right? That question comes up a lot. And,
what do I say?
What do I say? And the answer is a frame that I'd love to present, Zach, which is,
Please.
Let's say an 8-year-old, let's say you have a niece, sends you a video message. Okay, that just says, "Hey Zach, happy birthday! I love you, and you're the best." Like, do you sit there and go, "Wow, this 8-year-old kid did not structure this video properly. Like the way that she didn't convey this." No, you look at it and you say, "Oh my God, did I just receive a video message from an 8-year-old? I really feel seen, heard, and understood." And
Mm.
that's the core skill set that an engineer needs to learn if they want to get into leadership roles. And that's what I encourage everyone in your audience to do, Zach. One thing I actually push VPs to do, but if you're doing it now, you're really positioning yourself for the future, is you send a video message to everybody in the engineering team, every single person,
Yeah.
right, on WhatsApp on your phone, and just say, "Hey, I really appreciate the work that you're doing," and it creates a level of loyalty and improves your communication skills drastically as well.
There's so much I want to say about this, but first, I'm curious why this is the one you think people resist or push back on the most.
I think the reason they resist on this is because it's so outside of their sphere of competence. So
Mm.
when something is usually outside anybody's sphere of competence, we don't want to do it. But when something's completely bipolar opposite to that zone of competence, we go, "There's no way that this is related to me getting to the next step."
Yeah.
Right? Versus what I would encourage people to do, which is a knock that I'll jump. I actually don't really get to say this often on podcasts, but because it's so
Let's
specific,
do it. Yeah.
right? It's kind of like certifications, right? I have a pet peeve with engineers and certifications. I always ask them, "Why are you getting a certification?" And they go, "Oh, because my other engineering friends are getting that." And I always ask them, "Zach, is your goal to be a better engineer, which is fine, or is your goal to be an executive?" And a lot of them say, "I want to be an executive." And I asked them, "How many executives do you know got an AWS certification this month?" And they go, Not really." Exactly, right? So it's the same thing with video messages. A lot of the tips that we're sharing, like the video message, a lot of people at your level don't do them, right? At
Hmm.
all. But the people who are 4 levels, 5
Yep.
levels,
Yep.
not all of them do them, but a good percentage of them do. And that's really the key. I think the reason why we don't do the video message is because it's not in the culture. It's kind of like
Yes.
communication in general. Engineering schools don't emphasize it enough.
Brenden, you're going to love this. So, in my coaching program, it's called the Lifestyle Engineering Blueprint. And I probably shouldn't say this because I'm going to be giving away part of what happens. But we have what are called C4 challenges. C4 is a part of the culture of OACO, the Oasis of Courage. It's to crush comfort and create courage. And one of the first challenges is to go live and introduce yourself in our private clients only Facebook group. And I've been in cohorts and masterminds and training programs with other coaches where they cherish the opportunity to go live and have people actually listen. They love it, right? But that's not the case for my clients. For many of them, recording a video message that you could delete if you don't like it and try again is scary enough. To go live in the group is terrifying.
Oh, yeah.
And as soon as they hit that button, the anxiety pops in, the palms are sweating, they don't know, it's very scary. And here's what I want to say, and you tell me if you would agree or if you'd add on this. To me, it's not even about your ability to record a 20-second video message. It's this recognition that true, powerful communication is about an exchange of energy. It's energy before strategy. Do you feel seen, heard, understood, appreciated, cared for? And am I able to convey something that's inside of me, genuine appreciation, and send that energy to you through the spoken word, the tone, the smiles, the 18 other balls. And if you can do it with appreciation, which is something we all generally can tap into, it starts to unlock that ability to then convey a deep conviction or to convey a deep sense of direction for the team on a piece of technology. And people feel that from you. And it's really about that. And that's why I love this exercise so much. I love it. So what do you think? Is that align with your thinking on it? And is there more to it? What would you say?
I have respect for you that you're forcing your clients to go live right away. I think that's awesome, right? Really getting them out of the comfort zone, which I think is awesome, brilliant. And then the other piece is more of a frame that I'd love to share, which is more of a visualization. Is there's so many architects, right, engineers who go out to these big engineering conferences, like let's say like a Dreamforce. You're like a solution architect at Salesforce. You sit in the crowd and you watch the CEO come up and he's like giving this big show and he's crushing it.
Yeah.
And you're sitting there and you're going, wow, this person's so cool. He's inspiring, right? Energy. He's bringing that, or she's bringing that, or she's amazing. But we don't ever think about with as an engineer is why can't I be that person on stage? Why can't I be the person who shows energy to the person? Because the person who's standing on that stage has the answer for us. Do what I'm doing. But then we go back, we revert back to saying, no, 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 Zach, I'm not going to go live. I'm not going to send these video
Yeah.
messages. And this is a concept I teach called wow versus how. So whenever you look at somebody aspirational that you want to become in your engineering career, don't just say, wow, this person's amazing. And we hear that all the time with people that are 3 levels above where we are. Instead, I want you to ask how. How did
Mhm.
that person get there? What are they actually doing? And a big piece of it is what you shared, which is the energy is more important than the strategy, in the sense of doing the video message is actually more important than doing it well.
Yeah.
That's why the quote that I always love to share is if you communicate 20% better than your competition, you will stand out 100% of the time.
Ah, love that. And the other reality, and you would think an engineer would get this, and yet the fear, I think, blocks us from action on this truth. If you're not able to convey energy, appreciation, inspiration to one person in a video text, where do you think you're going to magically leap to able to do that to 10,000 people from the big stage? And we all need to be willing to go through those phases of sucking at it to get to where I can do it well with one if I ever want to do 1,000 or 10,000. And I think it was Zig Ziglar, the godfather of all coaches. It's like, he said, anything worth doing is worth doing poorly, because you don't just have the gift of being great on day one. Like, everything that we discover, we stumble through those early stages, we crawl before we walk. And so I think this is an awesome exercise. These 3 things, it's come up in almost all 3 in the context. And you and I chatted before we hit record today that if I was going to pick one barrier that stands out for engineers around communication, it's fear. This fear of public speaking, the fear of being seen as not smart or not intelligent, the fear of saying something I don't mean to say and being misunderstood or being wrong. There's a lot of different fears that manifest. So as you coach leaders to being true top communicators, when they bump up against these various fears, how do you help them recognize what it will take to break through? What advice would you give? Just be a coach for a minute.
So there's 2 parts to this game. One is something that's very counterintuitive, which is the fear itself shouldn't be something that we should worry about. Why? Because we need to go back to what made us successful as engineers in the first place. Systematizing processes. So the first time we started learning a code, we started to systemize something. We didn't just sit there and go, you know what, Zach, I'm really scared of this. My first time, I don't know how to do this. And we went home. That's not what we did. We sat there and we optimized that process. We said, how can we make it better? Whether it's lean, whether it's a code base, it doesn't matter what the engineering problem is. We didn't run away from that problem. We just said, this is just unemotionally, objectively, a process that we learn to manage. What if we saw communication as the same way? What if communication was just the process that we need to manage? So with that frame in mind, I think this is a good
Yeah.
segue for my own story, which is I have every excuse not to be a great communicator. I grew up in Montreal, Canada, which is a city you need to know how to speak French in, Zach. And it's a language I didn't know. So my whole life, I was presenting in a language I didn't even know, which was French, let alone being scared of communication. The second challenge, I got a physical disability on my left arm that's still crooked to this day because I was born upside down. They pulled me out of a vacuum. But the reason I point that out is because even today, when I speak, people always look at my arm. They don't look at my eyes. It's just hard to catch on a podcast, as an example. And then the third thing is you would think that a communication expert, the person who should be checking all the boxes, probably studied in communication. But I have a bachelor's degree in accounting. Why did I think I could be a great speaker? And that's what it comes down to. The boxing match analogy, where one side of the ring is the fear, the anxiety, the stress, and the other side of the ring is the message. Why does this matter? And the goal is not for the fear to leave the ring, but rather make sure that when that match begins, that your message wins every single day of the week. Last point on this is an acknowledgement that everyone listening to this podcast, I fundamentally believe, Zach, has achieved something way harder than doing the random word exercise. And one prominent example that I think is relevant for most of the people you've worked with as well is immigrating to America, immigrating to a first world country. There's so many people who have no money in their pocket, who lived in India, who lived in China or some other country, and they moved to a different one in search of a great opportunity on like an H-1B1 visa, right? In hopes for a better future for themselves. And they did that and they accomplished that. And they can't do the random word exercise 10 times a day. I don't think so.
I love this. It's so interesting. And I'm thinking of one of my clients right now, an amazing leader, works in one of the top big tech organizations, on paper, has all the accolades you could ask for, but has a dream to start his own business, to be an entrepreneur, to take this idea that's stirring inside him and bring it to the world. And that is his message that he wants to bring. And he's come to me and said, Zach, like, I must improve in my communication skills, because how will I be the inspiring leader and entrepreneur that I need to be to build this organization and create this amazing product and change the world in the way I want to change the world if I'm not able to get in the front of the room and command their attention and communicate clearly? English is, I think, a third language for him. And he's got a similar set of challenges around immigrating and these things. And I said, you know what? I totally get it. Let's begin. And we actually, we didn't use these exact same 3 exercises, but I will say one of the things that I had him do was grab some of his favorite literature, because he likes to read. I said, let's just start reading that out loud and getting the diction and the practice around the language. And, it was the same thing where it's like, how is that going to help me become Steve Jobs? I said, look, let's not worry about being Steve Jobs yet. Let's just get our first line of Python on the screen with no errors, right? Let's just do that. So I think this is just so, so powerful. Brenden, for you, when you're working with somebody they really want this, they want to go after being a top communicator, the top 1%, like, it's worth it. Their message is worth it. They're willing to put in the reps. Where do you encourage people to focus when it comes to the whole picture of their life and career? Like, where do we fit it in? And I guess what I'm thinking about is this idea of the arena. Where do we practice, et cetera? So we gave these exercises. Is it all happening on the side? Like, you need to get up early and carve out extra time? Is it practice in the context of your life? Here's these key moments, get more conscious, more intentional. Like, can you help us weave it in? How do we make this a habit and a ritual that we're constantly improving?
Fantastic question, Zach. Here's what I found is the most likely to succeed.
Okay.
The best one is to integrate it with your family. So I'll give you a few examples. Let's say you're somebody who has children, who has family members in your home. What you want to do is you want to integrate these 3 exercises with the family bonding time that you have with them. So I'll give you a
Okay, I
typical
love that.
example. You're a manager of engineering, you're in your 30s, 40s, 50s, and you have kids who are usually between the ages of, let's say, 5 and 16. So when you're picking them up to and from school, don't just put music on, have them give you a random word. Have them
Yeah.
hold you accountable, and then you give them the random word exercise. And there's so many people that tell me this all the time, Zach, and it's not even about communication anymore. It's about, wow, you like gave me something to talk about with my family when all they do is just watch TV when I come home. We don't have that conversation versus like, oh, Zach and Brenden told me to do the random word. Can you practice with me? And then it becomes more of a family bonding experience. So it doesn't feel like a chore. It feels more like, oh, like this is a part of my day to day. Another piece is I hope, like we said earlier in this podcast, I hope everyone showers every day. You got 15 minutes in there. You're not taking meetings while you're in the shower, right? So do that random word exercise there. And then for the question drill, what I encourage you to do is it doesn't always have to be about work. You can ask the
Good.
people in your family really open-ended questions. Like, for example, I like to ask this one a lot, and you can ask this to kids and to people around you. What's the biggest lesson you learned about yourself this year? See, that is what gets people thinking. And it also forces you as the engineer to ask questions that, yes, are outside of the scope of your technical expertise, because you're going to have to do that as a leader. Because when you get promoted in leadership, it's not just about leading teams, it's about small talk. It's about
Yeah.
talking to the people around you. So those open-ended questions will really push you out of the comfort zone. And finally, the video message can also be integrated with family. All you have to do
Yeah.
is get your kids to send video messages to their relatives, like to an auntie and uncle, and that really gets them fired up. Say, "Wow, I got a video message from my 8-year-old," and it makes people's days.
I really like this. And again, the engineer in me, Brenden, appreciates that you're giving me the specific, easy ways to just say, no excuse. I can plan it. I know when to do it. I can make it happen. But the thing that I'll mirror back that I think is cool about that recommendation is when you ask someone else the open-ended question, you might think initially, well, that's not going to help me. Like, I'm the one who needs to practice answering, not them. But when I ask you a question, you're going to answer, but almost every time you'll mirror the question back to me. Like, well, what did you learn last year? And you do end up getting the opportunity now to do the question drill with that person without needing to frame it as this awkward exercise that Zach and Brenden said to do on the podcast. And I think it's the same thing if you have kids. Have the kids send the messages first. Their aunt and uncle are going to really be heart warmed by that. And then you can come behind that and send your own message to them and say, hey, I know Sally, my daughter, sent you a message earlier, and I just wanted to send one too and let you know that I really appreciate you. You can get your own rep. It's like, let them open the door to it and break the ice. And nobody ever was upset when an 8-year-old sends the message. It's too good. So I think that's brilliant. I love that. Last thing for now, I wish we had another 2 hours because there's 100 things we could talk about, and communication is so important. But there is a big push in the world of personal development around the word authenticity, being yourself, being true to who you are, honoring that, who is Brenden, you do you, and this whole kind of thing. One of the segments on your show, Master Talk, that I think is super interesting is all about present like, and you have some of the best presenters and communicators in the world. And I just wanted to get your perspective about why modeling somebody else who's world class is the right thing to do to practice when a lot of the world would say, well, screw that guy or that girl. Who cares how they do it? You do it in the way that's authentic to you. You don't need to sound like anybody. Find your own voice. That kind of a mantra. And so could you explain a little bit about why practice and model after others, but then also where's the truth of this whole finding your own voice message?
I love the nuanced questions, Zach. I think you've noticed so far that I'm game for anything, so I'm glad that you went there. So there's two parts to this, right? The problem with the word authenticity, in my opinion, is that this is an engineer's nightmare because it's not something you can optimize. Like, what does being authentic mean? Do you want me to keep being my introverted self, not asking people open-ended questions? So there's kind of that problem. And then you have the other way, which is, hey, if I model the world, what if I don't want to be the best in the world? So kind of how do you model both of these realities? How do you bridge the gap? So we bridge the gap by understanding the following. The first piece is, let's go back to software engineering, just as an because I just know that space a little bit better. If there's somebody else who has a code base that already works, am I really going to spend 5 hours recoding that? No, I'm just going to copy paste and say thank you. Yeah. Right? That's it. Right? If somebody's already doing a better job that is working on the same engineering problem as us, we don't need to reinvent the wheel, right? Lessons learned in project management. We all know this. It's engineering 101. How do we apply that to speaking? Let's draw the compromise. So the compromise for us, Zach, today is write down somebody in your field that you want to become. So I'll give you an example. So for people in software, let's say you want to be Nathan Blakarczyk, right? Who's the CTO and co-founder of Airbnb. The guy's super good, great communicator and very technical as well. He's really good at both. So he is someone, let's say you're somebody sitting in the audience that I want to be that person, or somebody in mechanical engineering who went to the C-suite, or you want to be a VP. Engineers don't often do, because the modeling still works. It's just different. It's not Tony Robbins anymore. It's about saying, when was the last time I listened to a VP of engineering being interviewed on a podcast, being interviewed on a panel at, let's say, Dreamforce or an SAP conference? Yeah. And a lot of engineers go, I've never done that. I've never really sat down for 15 minutes. So that's one piece. You don't need to model the best of the person you want to become.
Yeah.
Because that way, when you look at that SVP of engineering and how they're answering questions, if you imagine yourself in that seat and go, what if they asked me those same set of questions? How would I answer them? Then you're modeling in a way that's leading to the outcomes that you want to optimize for in your career. So that's one piece. The other piece is the realization, Zach, that authenticity can only go so far. Meaning, if you're a 9 out of 10 technical talent in any field of engineering, but you're a 5 out of 10 in communication, it doesn't matter how great you are technically. You'll still get paid well, you'll still keep your job,
Yep.
but
Yep.
people in your company outside of the engineering department will see you as a 7 out of 10, a 6 out of 10 talent. So that means, in other words, force yourself to get better at communication, not to be like on a stage in front of 20,000 people, but to say, let me get rid of my ums and ahs. Let me speak a little bit better in my meetings so that it's a no-brainer for me to get the role and the responsibilities that I deserve and I worked for in this organization to get.
Pure gold in there. And one thing I'll add that I tell my clients a lot, Brenden, engineers wish, and in some core level, lie to ourselves to believe that all the opportunities we want and promotions we want and to become that executive we want to become or whatever level you aspire to, that it will happen on the back of my great results in engineering, being a great engineer. And I should be rewarded for doing great work. And it's like, my heart's with you, brothers and sisters. It really is. But unfortunately, that is not how it works. You do not become that executive leader on results alone. It's your whole reputation, which includes your ability to reach people and communicate and build relationships and emotional intelligence and all these other really core pieces. So take this seriously, everything that Brenden shared today, Happy Engineer, because this is for real. Wow, Brenden, we need to know where to go tap into MasterTalk, get these exercises, practice more, hire you, all of that. Where can we find you? What's the next step?
This is super fun, Zach. Thanks for having me on the show. Love the questions, love the energy. So 2 ways to keep in touch. The first one is the YouTube channel. Just go to Master Talk in one word. You'll have access to hundreds of free videos on how to communicate ideas effectively. And the second way to keep in touch is to attend one of my free communication workshops over Zoom. I do a free one every 2 weeks. Everyone's invited. 8-year-olds come to this call. Big CEOs come to this call. Everyone's invited to the party. So if you want to jump in, go to rockstarcommunicator.com.
Perfect. Perfect. And if you're on your mobile device listening right now, just jump into the show notes on whatever podcast player you're in. Everything will be linked up right there. Take action now. This is tremendous value. I can personally acknowledge I've seen Brenden's videos. I've watched dozens of them. They're tremendous. You will not regret it. Brenden, I'm excited to hear your perspective on this ending point. We always finish in the same place. And your background in accounting, but your knowledge of engineering and technology, you get it, that great engineering, great coaching, it all has in common that the questions lead, the answers follow. And we all want better answers in our life. We want to get to that next goal. We want to become top 1% communicators. So for that engineering leader who's been tuned in with us today, who wants to reach the next level in their communication, but also be a happy engineer, what's the question that you would lead them with today?
I would say the question for me, Zach, would be, how would my life change if I became an exceptional communicator? Really reflect on that question. How would my life change? And what I've seen as a positive note to kind of end this is there's a lot of engineers who do take that initiative, who go, you know what, I'm really scared, but I'm going to sign up for this DevCon conference. You know what, I'm really worried about this panel, but let me just do it because nobody else in my department is actually going to do it. So why are these people taking actions? Because they're better than us? No, no, no. It's because they're moving with the fear, because they can imagine their life being better because they say to themselves, you know, well, if nobody else is giving that panel, I'm the one, then I'll be the only person who actually has a personal brand in this industry, and I'll probably stand out. So let me take that opportunity while I'm scared. So I encourage you to think about that, but not just in your careers. How would my life change if I was an exceptional communicator? Think about in the context of your family. If we're being introverted at work, that means we're introverted with our kids. with the people around us, with our friends, and communication helps us lead a more fulfilling life. So think about it in all spheres of life.
Brilliant. Brilliant. I love it. Brenden, just want to acknowledge you again for the amazing work you're doing, the lives you're impacting with MasterTalk and your work. And thank you so much for your generosity to bring truly valuable tips, actionable skills, and content here today. It's been a real pleasure. Thank you so much.
Pleasure was mine, brother.